So here's the big question. Why ThreatLocker? Like, why would you use it? What are the, what's it really going to do for you that maybe your current products aren't doing? And so I put story time right here because I'm going to tell you a quick story of how we found ThreatLocker and why we use it today. So 2019, it was early 2019. We onboarded a new client. They were with us for maybe, I think, like 4 or 5 months. We had installed a very reputable EDR, MDR solution. I won't say the name, but the first letter starts with S and there's a one in there somewhere. So a little joke there, but very reputable solution that we put in place, fully managed. And at that point, we thought that meant, cybersecurity is pretty much handled in terms of, a really solid EDR, MDR solution. Well, they had an HR person who listed a new job posting and she said, hey, send in your resumes to this email address, right? Seems pretty innocuous, right? Like a normal thing to do. But the hackers are pretty smart about that too. And they saw that email address and they said, hey, this looks like a prime target. So they sent in what looked to be a resume. As a matter of fact, the document was called resume.docm, right? So this was a macro-enabled Word document. To her, of course, the icon looks like Word, the name says resume. She opens the file and she ignores about 2 or 3 warnings that Word throws up at you and says, hey, I don't know if you really want to do this because this could potentially harm your computer, but she ignores all that. She blow past all those warnings. Her screen flashes and then it just goes away. And in her mind, she thought, hey, this was not anything. Maybe this file's just damaged. It's just not working. So she just ignored it. Meanwhile, in the background on her system and so her local system and on her server, every single PDF file that it came in contact with, this malware, it was attempting to encrypt. Now we had, like I said, a pretty solid EDR solution. So it was attempting to do it. It was starting to scramble the file, but then it would get caught. And so literally it just obliterated PDF files everywhere on her local system, on all their server shares, which she was a high level person. So she had access to almost everything. So it's just obliterating PDF files. Nobody notices for, a couple of hours and then they reach out to us and we're like, oh my gosh. So we could quickly figure out where this is coming from and we start the process to shut it down, remediate, restore. Now, this organization ran on PDF files in terms of plans, manufacturing plans, things like that. So it took us a full 2 weeks to really clean that up, get all their files restored. And in the end, we lost that customer because they said, you know what, we really thought you guys had us protected. This obviously failed. They were disappointed. And honestly, as a CEO, I was disappointed because I was like, we thought we were doing the right thing. We had top level, still one of the top level rated solutions in place, and it couldn't stop it. Now, it did stop, interestingly, it stopped Word and Excel files from being scrambled or encrypted across their enterprise, but for whatever reason, it just let PDF files get annihilated. So that was a wake-up call for us in 2019. So I started a process of saying, let's go back, let's research, what's out there, what can we do different with our security stack, and what can we bring to our clients that may make a difference. And with that, we actually, I was actually researching and I found this little Reddit thread of people who were posting like what their security stacks look like. And one person had a little reference to a product called ThreatLocker. And I was like, whoa, I don't know what that is. So I dove in, started researching, went to their website, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think this is what I'm looking for. And what I understood very quickly was that a default deny type solution could have massive benefits. We were already using AppLocker from Microsoft in one of our clients. So we picked up a client who had been hit with ransomware twice before they became our client. So they were particularly susceptible. Their users were particularly gullible. They made a lot of mistakes. So we set up AppLocker with them and it was working. It was at least preventing them from ransomware, but it was a nightmare to manage. So we were already kind of believers in this, default deny, allow listing type strategy, when I saw ThreatLocker, I realized this could actually be manageable and this could be done not only for one company, but for many companies. So we signed up for a demo. And that was, like I said, 2019. We then deployed it, and I'm going to show you one of the clients we deployed it for later in the webinar, but we deployed it, and since that time, 2019, since we got it rolled out to this day, 5+ years later, we haven't had a single data breach with a single client, significant. And what I mean by that is we have had a couple of clients who didn't turn on MFA for their email or just wouldn't because of, circumstances. And so they've had like their mailbox broken into or something like that, but no data breaches. And we do attribute that to the fact of having layered security and having ThreatLocker as a true zero trust solution. So I kind of wanted to give you that story. That's how we ended up with ThreatLocker. I'm going to show you the one feature, and I may be stealing a little bit of DeShawn's thunder here, but I'm going to show you the one feature that we were most interested in first, and then I'm going to let him kind of jump into some of the other aspects of ThreatLocker. That first thing was application control or allow listing. And if you've never used a solution like application control or ThreatLocker, kind of the key to it is thinking of it being the opposite of what antivirus or EDR does. It's not trying to detect something and react to it. It's actually preventing on the front end. So these screenshots of what I'm going to show you here is this right here shows what happens. I had one of our security analysts, his name is Burhan right here. I had him try to run Steam, install Steam on his machine while he was in protection mode with ThreatLocker. And what you notice is that right here, it gets denied. Then he gets this pop-up right here that says, to protect you from cybersecurity threats, this has been blocked from executing. If you want to run this, click request access. You click request access, you get a screen similar to this. And this is really eye-opening right here because you actually see what that software, Steam in this case, or I think you guys all know Steam is mainly for gaming. So it's a platform that a lot of gamers have, run through. So if you allowed Steam to run on this machine, it would have access to your web data, your internet access, and even local passwords. So this is eye-opening to begin with. Secondly, it shows you who this developer, where are they? They're in the US, Netherlands, and Poland. Now you might have one of your users who does this, and they're going to get a pop-up like this, and it's going to say Russia, Ukraine, North Korea, and maybe that'll be enough for them to not continue with sending in the request. I don't know. But then that user might go right here and say, hey, I want to play games during working hours and hit send request. When they do that, in your case, if you adopt ThreatLocker, you can have that request go to, an internal help desk, or in our case, it goes to our service desk. We then analyze that software, and the way we do that is ThreatLocker has a built-in virtualized environment, basically, where we bring that file into it, we run it, and we see what it would have done or what effect it would have on a Windows computer, down to the registry, internet access, file access, everything. And so we're able to do a very quick analysis to determine, is this going to harm that machine? Would this harm other machines in your environment? And from that, we can say, yes, we're going to approve it for that one computer, this group of computers, or all your computers, so you're not having to do this one by one on every single machine in the environment. So this is powerful, but it is an extra step, right? You're doing this on the front end because you're creating a baseline of what is good, and that allows you to prevent everything else. So, DeShawn, if you wouldn't mind, talk a little bit about, I know these are kind of the core applications that are included with ThreatLocker, and then these are some of the enhancements, just basically what these are, any insights you have about other parts of the ThreatLocker solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that introduction as well. And I guess a little bit more of an introduction. Hi, I'm DeShawn, everybody. So I'm one of the solution engineers managers here at ThreatLocker. Been here for a little over 3 years here, and before that, I was actually at an MSP managing ThreatLocker for about 1,000 endpoints. So I've seen a good bit of what ThreatLocker is and how it can help you. So to speak a little bit more about what these different core applications as well as some of the enhancements are, we have ring fencing there. Neal did a great job telling you about application control, really bringing in that zero trust deny by default premise there, only allowing what you need and want to run on your systems. That's always the great first step into zero trust. I'm controlling the applications that are allowed to execute. We still have a problem. There's still threat actors that come in and weaponize these applications. They live off the land. They turn PowerShell against you, even though that's built into all your systems. There's supply chain attacks. Things like 3CX have been compromised. 7-Zip have been compromised. What we do with ring fencing is we take that application control step further by limiting what your approved applications are allowed to interact with in terms of your other applications. We want to make sure things like Microsoft Office, if someone opens a macro-enabled document, doesn't allow Office to reach out and talk to PowerShell, to run a script, to download a payload there. Things like PowerShell, we want to make sure PowerShell can still run. Many people still need it to do scripting, automation, logging, but we don't want PowerShell just randomly reaching out to payloads.ru. We don't want them downloading things or going places that PowerShell should not be able to go to. So again, we can limit that access to only what these tools need to touch. And again, we could do that for your files, PowerShell, command prompt, great examples of things that really should not have unlimited access to every single file on your machine, on your network, on a USB drive that you plug in. We really need to only give those tools the access that they absolutely need. And then again, the registry interaction there, making sure tools, little small tools, tech tools, big applications, things that are, I don't like that app because it never gets updates, it's always clunky. Well, I don't want it touching my registry again, except for where it absolutely needs to. Now, from there, we do have network control. One of my favorite ones, and this again just brings that zero trust to the network layer there, essentially our host-based firewall here with dynamic access control. A lot of people can manage their endpoint firewalls by going to the Windows firewall, going in, opening up a port persistently for a list of IP addresses. Typically, when you need to let users in, you have more than one user. So it can get kind of cumbersome. And the biggest problem that we see that Microsoft sees as well is that people typically open up ports to an entire subnet. Now this network can connect to my resource there. But we tend to not only have managed devices on our networks. We have phones, we have IoT devices, we have people that take their laptops from a nice clean network and they take it home. You don't manage their home network, but there's all kinds of stuff crawling around on it. So network control, again, just gives you control over what that computer is going to listen to. I will not open up ports unless I'm opening a port that is needed by another ThreatLocker protected machine at an IP address that I determine at that time. We keep that dynamically updated so you don't have to keep managing lists. So we bring you the protection, but we make it really, really easy to manage there and keep those unmanaged, unknown threats out of your devices. Now, we also have Configuration Manager, really OS hardening made easy here. So this is going to replace a lot of things like group policies, scripts, laps, things like that that you might already be used to with group policy, or you might not have the pleasure of using in certain environments, or maybe you do use it in every environment and there's repetitive tasks that you need to do. So we give you a policy-driven approach to apply some of these same configurations to all of your machines, or maybe just a couple of machines. So even simple things like setting a logon message, now incredibly easy to set the same logon message for every single one of your users. But even more powerful things, disabling network protocols that you're either not using yet or not using anymore, like IPv6 or SMBv1. Disabling ability to access macro-enabled documents, controlling administrator, guest, local accounts, password complexity, age, length requirements. So lots of things that you could have done through group policy, but you'd have to force it. You'd have to wait on it. If there's an administrator who's able to change it, it gets changed and you don't know about it. Well, now we push these configurations down to a minute. We check them every minute. We tell you if someone was able to change them and that we had to change it back and allow you to address the user issue there. So really an easy tool to make your environment a lot safer. Now, we do also offer some enhancements there. Cloud Control. Cloud Control is going to be your dynamic access to your Office 365 tenant. My users can sign in from where they are currently located, as determined by either a ThreatLocker object or their location from the ThreatLocker Access mobile application, feeding that location up to Microsoft, making sure Microsoft knows those are the only places your users can log in from. Now we also have elevation control, our privilege access management tool there. This tool not only allows you to remove users from local administrative groups, but give back local administrative privilege down to a process level, not making your users admins, but allowing them to run specific processes as if they were local admins on their machine. And with ring fencing, you pair those together and we make sure you only give that elevation to the one specific process or the few specific processes that need the elevation. And you ring fence that from allowing that elevation to spread any other program or process on your system. Big pitfall of a lot of other privilege access management tools there. They'll just give that privilege out and it can bounce into other applications. So we add security on top of convenience. Now we also have storage control. This one, as well as network control, they will both start off with no configuration, giving us full visibility over what's happening in our environment. We see reads, writes, movement, deletion of data across all of our endpoints, those external drives, network shares. Just like network control gives us full visibility over the traffic in and out of our endpoints by port, by process there. And just like network control, storage control also gives us control over how our data is accessed. So we can go make conditional policies. I don't want to allow USBs, or I only want to allow these USBs by serial number. Or maybe I do need to allow people to access a particular share, maybe a backup share, but I need those people to only be using the backup tool to access the data in that share. So very granular access that controls how people and programs and machines can access your data in your environment. Last few here, we have Detect, which is our endpoint detection and response tool. So it's going to leverage the telemetry from all of the controls. We have a whole control cupcake, I like to call it, and Detect is the cherry on top there that alerts you, lets you know if there is an indicator of compromise that either happened or attempted to happen in your environment. And I say indicator of compromise because our base list that comes pre-configured is largely based on the MITRE ATT&CK framework, but Detect is not just an EDR that looks for indicators of compromise. It can be tuned to look for any activity in your environment, whether it's malicious or if Steve is just downloading Steam again, we know it's not going to run because we have controls. But I just want to see if he's doing it so I can go give him a slap on the hand. Or maybe I do want to look for something a little bit more malicious. Have 1,000 files been accessed in under a minute? If so, I want to go ahead and enable a storage control policy that blocks access to that location. So again, you can use it as your detection and response tool for really any behavior across your user systems. We do also have Detect for the cloud. So there's Microsoft 365 Detect there, does that same thing for Microsoft 365. It doesn't use your on-device telemetry. It uses cloud telemetry from your graph and your Microsoft APIs there to, again, respond to indicators of compromise, locking accounts, changing passwords, just for things like impossible travel, inbox rules that get created, maybe even malware detected within SharePoint. Really, again, anything in that graph tenant we can respond to. Now we do have services as well. So we have our Cyber Hero MDR team. That MDR team is there to help you with your detect. If you don't want to watch your board and respond to all these indicators of compromise, maybe some of you enjoy sleep and you're not always up at 3 in the morning watching for the threat actors there. We have teams that don't sleep. At 3 in the morning, someone tries to attack you, we will be there. We can blow your phone up. We can isolate your machines for you to stop those attacks, stop that spread, really take care of the detect, both on-prem on that, or not on-prem, but the on-device and the cloud version of Detect. And then finally, Insights, another decision-making tool within ThreatLocker. So this will give you information on the files that you're seeing in your environment. It helps you determine, should I allow this file? Should I block this file? Should I allow it, but severely limit what it has access to based on what we've seen from all of the millions of ThreatLocker endpoints that are deployed there? And that's both in the unified audit and when receiving those requests that Neal talked about there. Again, just to help you make a very informed decision on what you should allow apps to do in your environment.
Awesome. That's great. So interestingly is in the example story that I shared earlier, the two things that would have made a massive difference are ring fencing and configuration manager. That macro-enabled malware, like DeShawn said, in this case, it actually did download, payload, and execute it. But if it was living off the land and just using built-in Windows functionality, ring fencing could have prevented that, like by blocking PowerShell. Configuration manager could have been set to not allow, Word-enabled macros to run. So there, had we had those tools, we could have prevented that, but we weren't able to prevent it with just a standard EDR tool. So just kind of pointing that out. In the beginning, ThreatLocker was not a detection tool. It was very much just application control, kind of prevention. Today, they do have detect. And so kind of from a security expert perspective, if you have a detection tool you love, maybe an EDR you love, my advice and what we do is we layer these things. So we do use ThreatLocker, application control, all that, but we also still have a detection tool as kind of a fail-safe. If something, if say we accidentally approve something in ThreatLocker we shouldn't have, we still have that detection tool that may be able to catch that. So that's just my perspective, and maybe some of you who are on the call. Detect is great, and actually their Cyber Hero MDR service is great. We've worked with both of those, tested both of those. They're incredible. It's just like DeShawn said, using Detect with other things like a storage control rule is very, very powerful. So my advice would be, if you're going to use ThreatLocker's detection tools, and you have a detection tool you're already using, keep it. Defense in depth, more layers, not necessarily a bad thing. So just kind of throwing that out there. So a few
And Neal,
questions. Go ahead, DeShawn. Yeah.
no, I was just say I'd also like to add that our detect will also show you things again that didn't even happen yet. So it shows you before you get compromised, whereas most other EDRs, they do have to wait. They have to respond to something they detected already happening in your environment. Since we pair with controls, we get to stop the threat, but still tell you there was something that we had to stop. So maybe someone did get the password to your administrator account, although we stopped them from executing anything. So now you know I need to go remediate that. I need to go change that password before they're actually able to compromise me. So again, it gives you kind of that step above there, just showing you a little bit before anything actually gets to happen. So just wanted to throw that little tidbit in.
Yeah, yeah, love that, love that. And so, um, some of the questions you're going to see come up on the screen, like this slide here, are ones that we've been asked before by clients. And so we're going to I'm going to kind of read these and address them, just because you probably have some of these same questions. So, how can ThreatLocker stop ransomware? The beauty is, I think you've kind of already seen the power of this, which is application control, ring fencing, storage control. When you start to put some of these things together, even network control, you're going to see that, stopping ransomware isn't as hard as you would think, because you're not relying on just detection. And that kind of goes to this third question here. But can ThreatLocker coexist with an existing antivirus and EDR? Absolutely. And we run it that way with most of our clients. So if you have a great EDR that you love, and you don't want to remove that, and you kind of want that defense in depth strategy, absolutely. ThreatLocker would be an added layer, not a replacement layer. And what strategy is better, prevention or detection? And really it's neither one, I would say, is better. We tend to favor, as a managed security services provider, we tend to favor prevention, because that ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? So we put a lot of effort into prevention, but we also think detection tools have their place, and so we run them both. We don't think one is necessarily better, but we think both is the right answer. So moving on to deployment methods, and I see we have a question here from Robert, and I'm going to take a look at that. I think, Robert, as I was reading your question, that you're kind of wondering about escalation. Maybe DeShawn, can you see those questions? I'm not sure if you see those.
Yep, I'm right reading through it right now. Looks like it is about elevation.
Okay. So, I'm going to answer this, and maybe DeShawn can jump in as well. But one of the tools built into ThreatLocker is elevation controls, which means, and I understand where you're coming from, Robert, which is, you have these users, they need that local administrator level authority to get something fixed or accomplished. But the key is, you just don't want them to have it all the time. And so with elevation control built into ThreatLocker, you can do that. What would you say about that, DeShawn?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can handle this in a couple of different ways. So you can see that these users constantly need to elevate certain things. Maybe it's the same thing. Maybe it's that spool serve or reg serve. So whatever the process is. So you can make a persistently elevated process policy and say these things, when they need to, are always able to be run with that administrative privilege. Now, if you don't want to leave it that open, you can still allow users to request administrative privilege. So when they do need to, they simply send in a quick little request that comes to a mobile application or a dashboard, and you or one of your techs just simply approve that request there. You don't have to log in and provide credentials. You just approve the request. The user is then notified. your request has been approved, and they can now run that same and only that thing with administrative privilege themselves without you having to log in. So a couple of different ways, depending on where you want to put the security and convenience slider, which side you favor.
Yes, and that's a great answer. And actually, Robert, the last part of your question there is about access to those machines. The good thing is with the ThreatLocker agent installed on those machines, they just have to have internet access, and you do all your work in the ThreatLocker portal. So you just have to be able to go in there to approve things essentially. So you don't need to be able to remote onto the machine to do anything necessarily. You just approve those elevation controls. So makes it pretty easy. Um, let's talk about deployment methods, and there's a lot of ways you can do this. One of the common ways we do it as a managed IT provider is through using an RMM. If you're a mid-sized company, you primarily do internal IT. You may have other ways of doing that. And so one of those would be group policy, very common way to deploy ThreatLocker. Some of our clients out there have deployment tools. There's ones called PDQ, for example, which is used for deploying software. You might use any one of these, or you might just manually deploy it if you don't have tons of endpoints, where you just install it manually. Some of the common issues are scripting errors. ThreatLocker actually provides some really great scripts, which will help you in many different scenarios to get ThreatLocker installed the first time. But one of the common things we see are permissions issues where maybe that script isn't being run as system or a local administrator for the first time to get it installed. So there's some small hurdles, little things. Once you kind of prove this out once with just a few test machines, usually you're going to have it very nailed down, and it'll just install itself either through group policy or your RMM and so on. So some other questions that we get are, why is ThreatLocker blocking legitimate applications? And so this is interesting question because ThreatLocker did something amazing. Like when we joined with ThreatLocker in 2019, they did not have this feature, but they do today, which is basically pre-approved applications or applications that they go ahead and they pre-approve, like Microsoft Office. They have those already in the allow list so that you're not having to go learn those applications and approve them for your environment. In the beginning days, we used to have to do that actually. So most of the everyday kind of, mainstream applications are going to be on those built-ins, as they call them, applications. However, if you have another line of business application that is not, and there's a process you go through of learning that, accepting that as good, and then it can run. There are a few trouble applications out there that we run into from time to time, really kind of legacy applications or applications built on very poor standards like Thomas Reuters, which does CPA, software. It just requires a little extra effort is all it is. So we don't really see this being a big hurdle. You just have to do a little bit of work, make sure they get properly approved and added, and then they work just fine. And we do this all the time. Um, does ThreatLocker need too much administrative engagement? I know that's a worry for a lot of people, is like you're putting in this new layer. Now you've got to approve applications for people ahead of time. How much effort does it really take? Well, the built-in applications take a lot of burden off of you. So those are kind of easy to accept and you don't really have to do much there. It's really just when they're trying to install something that's never been seen in the environment that you've never approved. And I'll give you an example. A lot of people today use Teams, Zoom. Not as many people use GoToMeeting, for example. So maybe GoToMeeting is not learned in your environment, and yet one of your executives gets a GoToMeeting request and they need to install the GoToMeeting plugin to attend a meeting. Well, in that case, they're going to need to hit send request. You can review and approve it, and then they can attend the meeting. So there is that little bit of administrative overhead. But what I like to tell my team is I would rather spend every day, and not that you have to, but every day, all day approving things than helping a company recover from a massive, ransomware attack or something like that. So it's not that high of an administrative hurdle, but just know there is some administrative effort, right? Because we're doing allow listing, which means we're really locking the environment down. Can ThreatLocker be deployed and used during an active ransomware incident? It actually can. Now, we've never had to do this, but I do know companies who have. And basically, what that means is, say there's a pretty large enterprise or a larger organization, and they're having an active ransomware incident. If they deploy ThreatLocker, they can actually gain fast control of the environment, and they can quickly stop all processes they don't want running and only allow their cleanup tools or the tools they want to run to recover from the incident. So I know a gentleman who works in our industry, but his whole business is focused around helping companies recover. He helped MGM casinos recover, and ThreatLocker is one of the tools they use. So can it be a helpful tool if something bad is happening like that? Absolutely, because you get to decide what runs and what doesn't. So moving on. Deployment concerns. This is the way we do it. I'm sure there are other ThreatLocker partners that maybe do it a little bit differently, but we like to deploy by department or groups. And especially if you're brand new to this and you're going to do a proof of concept and you're saying, hey, I want to try this out, how would you do it? Well, you want to think of your systems in terms of groups of what their roles are, maybe departments and things, and do some testing and do some things like that. Now, ThreatLocker has some great built-in tools that show you what would be blocked if even while they're not in protection mode, which is really helpful because you can then look at that audit and say, ooh, I got to allow this, or no, I shouldn't allow this, right? But we like to take a little bit of a baby step approach to it just to avoid pain with end users. Will users get frustrated, right? If they're used to having full control of their machines, full local admin control, do whatever they want, this is going to be a shift for them. Now, a lot of you, I've probably, if I've talked to you, I may know this already, but a lot of you, your users don't have local admin privileges. But if they're used to that, if they're power users and they're used to doing whatever they want, and you bring this in, it's an extra hurdle for them because they're now having to get someone else to approve what they're able to run. So just keep that in mind. That's really the only users that are going to be frustrated. Everybody else is already used to the fact that they're probably not allowed to install very much. What ThreatLocker does, though, is it takes it to the next level of not only can they not install something, but they can't run things that could be harmful to their system, right? Um, Application approval, elevation requests should be handled quickly. That's one of our key points is if you're going to roll out ThreatLocker and you're going to do a proof of concept, is make plans to review these things quickly and approve them quickly if when needed, right? Like I said, if you've got a high-level executive, they need to join a go-to meeting and they're being blocked by ThreatLocker, hey, quickly review it, approve it. Don't hinder their work. So just make plans for that if you're going to do it. And then one of the mistakes we see are leaving machines in learning mode instead of doing the diligence, getting through learning mode, putting them into protection mode so that you're actually deploying. So I think what happens sometimes when people do these proof of concepts or they're rolling out ThreatLocker, they're just a little gun shy and they let the machines learn for too long. And that's dangerous because now you could be learning bad software as well. So we recommend make sure the environment's pretty clean to begin with. Do a very, like a 1 week learning period, something like that, or less, and then go into protection mode. And from that, you can solve the problems that may come up, which usually aren't very much. Any thoughts on any of that, DeShawn?
Yeah, I was going to say the last point there was actually a systemic issue that we had seen and actually made a change as a company to help with because we used to, during deployment, have everyone deploy the endpoints in learning mode indefinitely. It gave you all the choice there, all the timing to say, okay, when I'm ready, I'll secure it. But then people would forget. So now we have implemented a 21-day by default learning duration. So when you deploy endpoints, 21 days, it'll lock itself down. Safe date that we found, because typically you can secure within about 14 days, gives you a little extra week there. And of course, you can extend that if needed, but it kind of gives you a safety switch. There are no more, oops, I forgot, and now I don't have any protection. So now we kind of helped with that last point just a little bit there.
Awesome. Yeah. And we usually do about 1 to 2 weeks. So yeah, 21 days is great. That's excellent. Um, Will users get frustrated and start a revolt? That kind of goes to my question before. Again, only the only users we see that ever really push back a little bit with ThreatLocker are like superpower users who are used to doing whatever they want. And now you're kind of putting some controls in place. It would be the same thing as if you took away local admin privileges of their machine. Um, but I will tell you this, kind of the key to this is speaking to top level executives, making sure they understand the risk that you're under by allowing people to have such, unrestricted control, and that this is really necessary. You really do need to take steps like this to protect the organization. And that way everybody knows that this is a mandate from the top down, and we are all gonna kind of comply with this. Me, myself, I'm sitting here on my machine doing this webinar. I'm not I'm not using an account that's a domain admin. I'm using an everyday user account. I don't have any extra privileges, so if I want to do something higher level, I have a separate account. My daily driver account is not capable of doing very much because that really limits your risk, right? So we have to be thinking in those terms. What about ThreatLocker false positives during deployment? That's the beauty of ThreatLocker is you can see what it would have blocked even before it happens. So you can instantly kind of say, "Oh, it's blocking this line of business application or this thing here. We need to make sure we get that resolved so you're not creating kind of some nastiness for your users," if that makes sense. Okay. So if you're going to do a proof of concept, what's important? And we think having a partner is very important. ThreatLocker does this too, by the way. We're not, they help companies do this directly, do trials, do all this. We do it as part of just our standard practice. So we'll assist you with strategies on which departments or groups to deploy to and how to kind of step that in. We can help with tricky applications that might need special rules to run correctly. And we won't, do the deployment for you, obviously, but we will kind of be your guide to success if you want to do a proof of concept. This company is a company that's been a client of ours for about 12 years. In 2019, we put this in place. They were one of the first clients we put on ThreatLocker. And a few years ago, they've been such a long-term customer. We said, "Hey, would you tell us why you like us? Like, why have you stuck with us? And what is it that you appreciate about us?" And really, this line stuck out at me. We have not been hacked, right? And so, that's really important to them that they feel like they can sleep better at night and they know that, hey, this level of protection is serious, and combine it with some of the other things you guys are already doing out there, and it's a powerful thing, right? And so just kind of, giving you that feel for where you can go with this, what a zero trust approach can accomplish. And just one example of one that we did that for. So I'd love for DeShawn to kind of, I can stop sharing my screen, give us just a little demo on application control, some of the main features. I think it'd be good for guys to see that. And then we'll do some question and answer afterwards.
Got it. Perfect. So screens coming up over here. And again, we're going to look at allow listing first. So remember, that's that policy-driven approach to allow what you want and need in your environment while still blocking everything else that is not on that list there. So we have a list of things that are allowed. Now, as we may have mentioned here, that allow list is not going to be an EDR powered, I'm looking for bad guys to block them. It's simply control of what can and can't run. So it doesn't have to be something malicious just to get blocked. It just has to be something that's not allowed, like a remote access tool. Common attack vector, Microsoft calls your users, there's a virus. I need you to install TeamViewer to let me into your machine here. Again, not inherently malicious, but still denied by default, simply because it is not currently allowed to run on this user's machine here. Now, again, as we mentioned, you do get that request. So just like if you were trying to run Steam, even if you were trying to run ransomware, or if you're trying to run TeamViewer here, your user can say, "Hey, I intentionally clicked on that. I do want to run this tool." Now, in this case here, it is TeamViewer. We let the user know, okay, we see this is TeamViewer EXE. That is remote management software there. If it's allowed, it could have access to your files, your network connection, your registry, and your applications. Here's where that tool was developed. Do you still think you need to run that tool? And they will say, yes, I still need to install TeamViewer here. So they go ahead, they give you a message. They can optionally enter in their email address just to receive an alert once you and your team do make a decision. And while these are both optional by default, you can make those required fields. So someone has to tell you, Why are you trying to run setup.exe? What is setup.exe? So you can require those fields before having your users send this request in. You do have an additional button here, log in as administrator. That is for you if you are a technician at a user's machine right then. They tried to run something, you tried to run something. This will instantly open the portal, the management portal, so that you, a technician, can quickly approve this. But still from here, the user will go ahead and send that request. Now, that request is always going to come to this response center, but it's never our intention to glue you to a portal. So we do have PSA integrations, ticketing systems, SMS, email support, even a mobile application. So you can respond to this request from your mobile phone without ever touching this dashboard. But the dashboard does give us good information. It lets us know Bob on this desktop here tried to execute this team viewer file, which we kind of determined from the pop-up, but now it's our turn. So we need to see, okay, is this actually team viewer? So we can look at these details here. We can say, okay, perfect. This is signed by TeamViewer. Bob told me, hey, I need to install TeamViewer here. Not much information, so maybe I still want to run the hash through VirusTotal just to do my due diligence and make sure everything is okay. Apparently, it thinks I'm a robot. Let's see if I can pass the test here just to show you. If I can't do it quickly, please believe me. Aha, I'm not a robot, but VirusTotal didn't want to show me anything. So typically in this one, this is legitimately, spoiler alert, team viewer. I would have a bunch of green checks there, but we could look for those red flags that would pop up there. But since I know, okay, this is team viewer, if I've decided that I do want to actually allow it, we make that very, very quick and easy. In this case here, we have a matching known application. ThreatLocker knows what this file is. We know that it's team viewer. So we conveniently give you a built-in that has all the components of team viewer now, and will have all the components later as it receives those incremental updates. So you don't have to come in here and keep configuring things every time this software updates. So we use that built in there, and we can deploy that to just that machine that asked for it. Maybe they're the only ones that need TeamViewer, or maybe they were just the first one that needed TeamViewer. Everyone else will be next. So instead of doing this over and over again, I don't want to glue you to a portal. We can just deploy this policy to our workstations group and allow everyone now to go ahead and run TeamViewer. Now, again, we make things nice and secure, but we also try to make them easy for you. So instead of going to each of these machines and giving those UAC credentials to all of these users to install TeamViewer, we can use elevation control to go ahead and allow those users to do that themselves. So no tickets, no extra text going out and putting in passwords, no logging in remotely to any of your machines. You just go ahead and say, hey, I'll give you an hour to install TeamViewer. After that, you can just continue to run it without the administrative privilege there. So nice streamlined process there with application control, again, blocking by default, but then giving you a quick and easy way to allow new software in your environment should you need to do that. Now you can see here, the user didn't have to put their email in and reach out to me and say, hey, can I run this yet? We give them a nice little pop-up here letting them know your request was approved. You can now run this application. So again, just making that incredibly streamlined for you, less work for you to do to keep your environment up and running and still nice and secure there. One other quick thing I want to go over is just the case where maybe we don't have a built-in, because again, the built-ins make it really easy. Now, maybe Bob requested something else. They requested Chrome setup here, but when we look at that, it's not validly signed by Google. Bob just told me I need this, and maybe I'm not comfortable letting it run on my machine just yet without knowing what it is. So instead of doing that, we also give you a testing environment here. Brand new virtual machine that we spin up on your behalf. It's hosted by us. It's not on your machine or your user's machine here. Just a nice clean place to run any file that you don't know what it is first here. So I can just make sure this is actually going to set up Chrome by using my risk center up here to show me if there's any VirusTotal indicators from this file or anything that comes out of it. We have canaries baked into this environment. If they're tampered with in any way, we get an alert, just as well as the rest of our full system monitoring, showing you things like startup items, registry changes, files that get added, really anything that happens you're aware of. So you can quickly run that file here, just confirming it's doing what it's supposed to do, or observing that it's not doing what it's supposed to do by the Christmas lights we have up here, where we can check this out and see, okay, it made a startup item called testvirus.bat. It also did some write activity, maybe encryption on my credit card data. And finally, there's a ton of virus hits here on VirusTotal now that it's unpacked. So I know it's bad. I can easily discard this, but if this was a perfectly legitimate application that I did want to now allow in my environment, I could just as easily end and capture. So some really cool tools there paired with application control. One, again, to block those threats, to block that unknown software, unwanted software, but also allowing new pieces of software really, really easily if it is something you want in your environment. And then I'll go ahead and close that window there. So this is the allow listing portion of it, just a good example of that. Now, another thing we talked about was the ring fencing. Again, I've allowed certain things in my environment, and I want to make sure those good applications that I've allowed remain good applications. So things that I mentioned, Microsoft Office here, even Neal talked about that with his story at the beginning there. Prime example of this, where we are allowing Microsoft Office, people in our environment need to run it. They need to be able to open documents here. So I'm going to go ahead and open one of my documents, not that one, this one right here. So in this document, this is something that a user may have been blasted, email, Word document, something that they feel is important and they need to read. In this case, internal bulletin coming from IT. So IT is telling everybody that they're requiring them to immediately change their password there. So really just pushing that sense of urgency there. I really need you to forget about all that amazing training you've given me and just click the password reset link. Hopefully, 99% of your users are still going to remember that training and say, yes, I hover over links. I'm not falling for that again. I know now this is going to open up PowerShell. But then we always have that 1% that just wants the Chick-fil-A gift card at the end of the rainbow there. They'll go ahead, click that link, find out what they have waiting for them on the other end, except in this case, I cannot open PowerShell. And that's because if I take a look at my Microsoft Office policy, you'll realize that while I am permitting Office, I'm currently blocking the following list of applications here. So it consists of things built into Windows, your command prompt, your regserve, your run DLL, and your good friend PowerShell down there, which you might all be looking at this list and say, great, I don't want my users touching any of those power tools, so I'm glad you're blocking it. But then some of you may think, okay, but wait a minute, we need that stuff. We need to run PowerShell for scripting, automation, logging. We need to get to command prompt. And that's perfectly fine because we can almost guarantee that you don't need access to these tools from within Microsoft Office here. So we're blocking the interaction while still leaving those tools available to you. Script away to your heart's content. We know there are great things that you can do with PowerShell, but we also know bad guys love PowerShell too. So we're going to ring fence that by default, along with a number of different applications that come baked into your system to provide protection against things similar to this. Happens to be a data exfiltration script. I'm just going to give it away now. I'm not some super crazy smart hacker that just knows how to make these scripts here. Luckily, there's this crazy free tool online called ChatGPT. It can make malware for you if you ask it. Now, it's on like version 4. You have to ask nicely. You have to say, I'm a security researcher. So hopefully none of the bad guys figure that out. But if they do, they can have ChatGPT make malware in about 30 seconds here that's going to do something like open PowerShell in the background, create a Google Cloud storage location here, and then just start exfiltrating all the data that this user on this endpoint will have access to. Typically, AVs, EDRs are going to let this run because your AVs are looking for a bad guy on their bad guy list here. This isn't a bad guy, it's just PowerShell here. EDRs, typically a lot smarter. They're looking for a lot more indicators of compromise there, lateral movement, infection, encryption, connection to a malicious domain, but again, none of that's happening. You're having a nice little chit chat with Google, which is not inherently a bad place, especially if you already use the Google Cloud Platform to do anything in your environment here. But if you take a look at our little blocked items list, you'll find that we have a good bit of PowerShell entries here. And you can see that PowerShell is being ring fenced here, meaning again, I didn't take PowerShell from you. You could still use it, but in this case, it was doing some things that we're not letting it do. In this case, we're still blocking it from interacting with certain applications just due to known vulnerabilities, but we're also blocking it from accessing your files. So it can no longer just reach in, grab whatever it wants, exfiltrate it, delete it, encrypt it. But if you do, of course, need it to touch certain files, folders, extensions, you're free to add those in as exceptions, granting PowerShell read and write, or maybe just read access to only the files it absolutely needs to touch. And you could do that just for the registry, just as well as the internet, which is already ring fenced by default. So even if a malicious script runs in your environment and it says, hey, PowerShell, go grab all these backups I found here and exfiltrate them to my server there. Or third-party supply chain attack. Spotify says, hey, PowerShell, go reach out to that server, download that payload, and attack all these machines down here. PowerShell's going to say, what servers are you talking about? Because I'm not able to access the internet to fulfill those random malicious requests here. But luckily for you guys, during learning mode, we'll take care of adding these exclusions for you as far as the internet restrictions go. So your users can keep reaching out to their updates.logitech domains, their Microsoft domains there to do the things they need to do in their environment. And then you lock them down and nothing can change. They can't be attacked by someone telling PowerShell to do something malicious to them that has never needed to do before. So just a couple quick examples there, just of really just allow listing in that ring fencing example. Neal, anything you wanted to add, or anything else you want me to cover in there?
No, I mean, there's so much you could cover, but
Oh yeah.
obviously we don't want to overwhelm folks. But I will say, one of the tools that you mentioned earlier that is powerful, and we don't have to go too far with it, but is network control. Is, for example, if you had a server and you're saying, "Hey, I only want only want computers with ThreatLocker installed to be able to
Yes.
access this server," what you've effectively done is you've said, hey, other devices like IoT devices, have no access to that server. So it's a powerful thing that people don't often realize. It kind of goes to almost like the old technology of like 802.1x, where you could configure a network to only certain endpoints are allowed to communicate. This just goes a bit further because you're going to the server level, to kind of the application level. So maybe just talk a little bit about network control, and then we'll
Mhm.
jump on.
Yeah, yeah, perfect. Yeah, so as Neil said, that really dynamic access control there, powered by these objects. So this is really in lieu of using a policy like this to allow access here, where I'm at my server's level. Again, traditionally, when you manage a firewall at the endpoint level, you're coming in and you're opening a port on those devices or that device, and you're opening it for an IP address. Those change, especially you use DHCP, you have anybody outside of that network, their public IP is going to change, and someone is going to have to keep up with that and keep managing it. That's when it gets a little bit loose. Someone might allow this entire subnet here to connect to my server on the RDP port, which I very much do not need. So what we're able to do to make this still effective and nice and secure here is instead use these objects, my threat locker protected endpoints here. We build a policy at this central management point that says I want to allow access to maybe a specific server, or all of my servers, I need to share this resource across this port. So we go ahead, we build that policy. Again, it's just like a firewall. You allow access to that port there, except this time I'm not using IP addresses. I'm not using subnets. I'm using objects here. And I can decide, do I want to be granular? Is there a certain machine or machines that I need to allow to connect to this resource? Maybe at this point it is more convenient for me to allow all of my workstations, not the entire network, but just the approved workstations on the network. Or maybe every device with ThreatLocker in this environment should be able to access this resource on this particular port there. So deploying this policy allows our users on that list to dynamically connect that resource from wherever their current IP address is. Now, the best part about this is when your users are done, they're not connecting, it's 3 in the morning here, they've disconnected. Well, we've closed the port back up. So it's not just sitting there open. It's not being scanned. It's not being brute forced, and someone finally is going to crack through there. It's always closed. They're moving on to the next guy with those open ports. The guy that forgot, oh, I did leave 3389 open on my firewall there. That's not you anymore. So that's what that's going to provide you with network control. Again, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, it's also good for not just your static resources like your server that's going to sit there and wait for those connections from your protected machines, but also your workstations, your laptops that leave the network there. You'd be very surprised with how little security there is inside of a network. Everyone cares about the edge. The edge is very strong. But then they have all these workstations in the environment with SMB shares open. Everyone can get to admin $sign. Everyone can use remote encryption tools because all I have to do is spin up a virtual machine within your network and use 7-zip. So it's something that a lot of people don't think about, but we're able to control, again, for every single endpoint from this central point of management here. Do not open SMB shares on workstations because I don't have a single file server that runs Windows 10. So lots of easy things that we can do there with network control to keep you so much safer.
One question that came up that was submitted beforehand was actually, how does this compare? And I'm going to give two product names out there. How does this ThreatLocker compare to SentinelOne and Auto Elevate? And so here's kind of my answer to that: is SentinelOne, being an EDR and can be an MDR tool, um, it's very much in the world of detection. And like I said before, detection and prevention are two different things. So we like to layer those together. We like to layer our detection tools and our prevention tools. And like I said, you can also use ThreatLocker Detect along with your existing detection tools and just tune those a little bit differently and gain more advantage. So I would say they're complementary. They're not an equal kind of one versus the other when you're looking at a tool like SentinelOne. Now, the tool we were using during that story that I told you in 2019 was SentinelOne. Not that it's a bad product. It's one of the top solution still rated today. It's near, kind of in that upper quadrant. I'm just saying it wasn't able to prevent the malware that attacked that one client. If we had ThreatLocker, we would have been safe in that case. So Auto Elevate is a great tool as well. It's very powerful at handling elevation control. What I like about ThreatLocker though is it's just a bit more granular when you combine it with ring fencing, like DeShawn said. If you combine ThreatLocker Auto Elevate, their elevation control with ring fencing, you're elevating, but you're limiting what that person can do, unlike Auto Elevate, where you're kind of opening it up to whatever they want to do. So just keep that in mind. Those are great tools. We just think ThreatLocker is another layer that should seriously be looked at and potentially inserted into your stack. Last thing I wanted to say is keep up the good fight out there, guys, against the hackers. We hope to see you guys on our next webinar. Thanks for joining. We'll talk to you later.